Barbara's sick. It's the middle of the night. She's been kidnapped, right? And they're telling her to get in the hole. Get in this fiberglass thing. Kind of looks like a coffin. So she begged for mercy, but they injected her with a tranquilizer to calm her down. Calm down, we're going to put you in a box. And as she laid back into the box,
you'll be fine,
she was handed a cardboard sign with the word kidnap scribbled on it. One of the kidnappers stepped back to take a Polaroid of her holding the sign under her chin. At first, her eyes were closed, and so the photographer says, "This won't do." "Open your eyes this time. Now smile. Smile," the person said.
How it all went south.
So the date is December 17th, 1968, right here in Decatur, Georgia, right connected to Atlanta, Georgia. Barbara Mackle, a 20-year-old Emory University student, was abducted from a motel in Georgia, right here, while recovering from the flu, staying with her mother. Posing as police officers, two assailants kidnapped Barbara at gunpoint, transporting her to a wooded area where they buried her alive in a specially constructed fiberglass box equipped with air vents and basic supplies. Now, the kidnappers demanded a $500,000 ransom from her wealthy father, Robert Mackle. And after complications, they successfully retrieved the money before tipping the FBI off to her location.
At least they did that much.
Barbara was rescued after spending over 83 hours underground, miraculously surviving the ordeal. The case remains one of the most harrowing kidnappings in U.S. history. This is the story of Barbara Mackle. This is How It All Went South. I'm Jason Hope. That's Sean Kipe. Live from 800 East Studios, right here in Atlanta, Georgia. This is How It All Went South. In December of 1968, the world was gripped by a pandemic. A virus had spread like wildfire and would claim millions of lives. It was the flu, or a strain of it called the Hong Kong flu. You ever heard of this?
I've heard of yes, but not the actual. I never knew what it was.
Yeah.
What it was about. I've heard parody kind of thing of the Hong Kong flu.
Yeah.
But I didn't know it was actually a real thing.
Yeah, right around 1968. And so college campuses everywhere, including Emory University right here in Atlanta, weren't spared from the illnesses. Hospitals overflowed, and with final exams approaching, it was inevitable that many students would get caught with under the infectious undertow. Among them was 20-year-old Barbara Mackle, a junior majoring in business at Emory. And Emory is just like a couple miles from me. So when you say Emory, it's like, wow, this hit pretty close to home. Barbara wasn't your typical college student, though. She was the daughter of Robert R. Mackle, a prominent Florida land developer. Mackle and his brothers were known for building Deltona Corporation, a $65 million real estate empire with headquarters in Miami. Now, fighting the current strain of flu that December, Barbara called her parents in Coral Gables, Florida, to tell them she was not well. And wanting to care for her daughter, her mother, Jane, decided to drive up to Atlanta to take care of her. Together, the two women would check into room 137 at the Roadway Inn Motel located near Emory's campus.
You got all that money, you're staying at the Roadway Inn?
I know. I bet you that place doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. Here, Barbara hoped to ride out the illness before going home for the upcoming holiday. So her mom was there trying to take care of her, all those things. Probably didn't want to get anyone else sick, too. So only a few days into their stay on December 16th, Barbara's boyfriend, Stuart Woodward, came to visit her at the motel. And after he left later that evening, her fever spiked, making it impossible for Barbara to sleep. So she and her mother spent the night talking. They just stayed up all night because, like, I'm sick. What else am I going to do?
Yeah.
Trying to pass the long hours as Barbara's body continued to fight the virus. Now, it was around 4 a.m. on December 17th when they heard a knock at their motel room door. Not moving from bed, Jane called out to ask who it was. That was her mom. A man claiming to be a police officer said there had been a car accident involving Barbara's boyfriend, Stuart. Sensing something wasn't right, Barbara told her mother not to answer the door, and her mom, Jane, was concerned. When the door creaked open, 2 ski-masked intruders burst into the room holding shotguns.
I told you, Mom.
Yep, don't do it. They said, "We won't hurt you. Get over there and sit on the bed," one of them barked. The women obeyed, though Jane assumed that this was a robbery. "Get out of here. Take it, and get out," they screamed, only to be silenced when one of the masked figures pressed a chloroform-soaked rag over her face. And you remember, like, I don't think that this happens anymore, but, like, when you abducted someone, you put chloroform in a rag over them and you passed out.
Yeah.
So Barbara screamed out, "Mother, don't fight them, don't fight them." And she begged as she was gripped by her arm and pulled from the bed. Before she could resist, Barbara was hauled out of the room and flung into the back seat of a blue Volvo. "Chloroform her. Put it on her mouth. Keep her head down," ordered the driver. But the other kidnapper hesitated, realizing that Barbara was ill, super sick. "She is sick. She has a fever," the woman said. Opting not to drug her, they kept her head down as they drove 20 miles away from the motel into the woods of Gwinnett County.
Oh, Gwinnett County. The place to go to commit a crime.
So crazy. So they're driving out to Gwinnett County and heading out in the middle of the woods. And the kidnappers led Barbara deep into the trees to a freshly dug hole. Inside was a coffin-like box lined with fiberglass, equipped with a fan, lamp, food, drinks, a blanket, a sweater, and a makeshift toilet. 2 air vents poked out of the ground, offering little ventilation. Barbara was told to get into it. I mean, right there. Stop. I mean...
Yeah. What goes through your head when you arrived at that scene, seeing that? It's just, I cannot imagine.
Why?
Cannot imagine.
Why? So specific.
Well, they planned it out.
Digging a hole and burying someone.
But I'll say this. At least you know that their intention, or you would get the impression their intention is not to kill you. Like,
Right.
I would feel better about coming out and seeing all that contraption set up than I would coming out and seeing just a hole in the dirt.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because that's...
Hey, a lamp, thanks.
Yeah, I got the bathroom. Yeah, you shouldn't have.
Thank you. Could I have a snack, please?
Yeah, they're in the compartment.
So she must start to put 2 and 2 together that she's being kidnapped for probably a ransom or something. But, you know, you're still in this box, and claustrophobia and just everything that goes in your mind of, like, 83 hours is a long time.
Oh, yeah.
That's a long time to be buried underground. I mean, we've talked about this before, I think. Serpent in the Rainbow, the movie. Yeah. Don't bury me, I'm not dead.
Yeah. Mr. Beast has done that a couple times. If you've ever seen that.
Has he really?
Yeah, in a glass or a box like that. Where
like a contest to see how long you
what did he did it for like a week or something.
So, listen, Barbara's sick. It's the middle of the night. She's been taken away from her mom. She's been kidnapped, right? And they're telling her to get in the hole. Get in this fiberglass thing. Kind of looks like a coffin. So she begged for mercy, but they injected her with a tranquilizer to calm her down. Calm down, we're going to put you in a box. And as she laid back into the box...
You'll be fine.
She was handed a cardboard sign with the word kidnapped scribbled on it. One of the kidnappers stepped back to take a Polaroid of her holding the sign under her chin. And we'll show you this photo. It does exist. This is a real thing. At first, her eyes were closed. And so the photographer says, "This won't do." "Open your eyes this time. Now smile. Smile," the person said. So they took another photo.
Can we get the key light a little?
I mean, and so they satisfied with the second photo. She's in there. The box's lid was screwed shut, and Barbara could hear drips of soil being shoveled onto it. She screamed, beating the roof of the container until her energy gave away. So she's doing this, right?
Yeah.
Let me out. Like your instincts
Sure.
kick in, your survival. Can you imagine?
No.
Take another photo, and she's almost like smiling. It's really creepy.
Yeah.
Kidnapped.
Yeah.
What a legendary photo, right?
Crazy.
Meanwhile, at the motel, Barbara Mackle's mother, Jane, managed to free herself from the room and was after being bound and gagged. She hopped outside, struggling to garner attention, screaming through a gap in the tape across her mouth. So no one was responding to her calls for help because they couldn't really hear her. So she managed to open their car door and lean on the horn to get attention. And so the horn is going off, and so finally the motel's night auditor, quick to quell the noise for sleeping patrons, rushed to her aid and untied her hands, helping her to call the police and get a hold of her husband. Robert Mackle rushed to Decatur from Florida to be with his wife, and by the next morning, the FBI had taken over the investigation. Hours later, the phone rang at the Mackle family home in Florida around 9 a.m. A male voice who asked for Robert Mackle said, "Tell him to look under a palm tree in the northeast corner of the house, under a rock about 6 inches down." So they had totally set this whole thing up.
Wow.
Yeah. Their FBI agents discovered a detailed note that described Barbara's burial. So they told them that she was buried and demanded $500,000 in unmarked $20 bills, none older than the 1950s series. Very, very specific.
Yeah, yeah.
The note outlined the conditions for payment. This is kind of weird. Stating that the money had to be paid within a week and that the serial numbers be in any random order. When the money had been secured, and here's the kicker, this is old school, Robert was to place an ad in the Miami Herald that read, "Loved one, please come home. We will pay all expenses and meet you anywhere at any time, your family." So you've got to go to the newspaper to...
Yeah, but it's actually, I mean, not to give these guys credit, but you know, it's pretty smart the way they've done it. Yeah, and then the random serial numbers is so that it's not
track.
marked trace bills, of course, but
imagine like having to place an ad in a newspaper as the signal that we're going to cooperate. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Very specific.
Yeah, it's wild.
So shortly after the ransom note was found, a package was delivered to the Mackle home that contained Barbara's necklace and the picture of her holding the kidnapped sign. Quick to evade the press, the FBI quickly swooped into Decatur to get the Mackle couple, driving them from the Atlanta airport the night of December 17th, boarding the Mackle brothers' private plane only to circle several times before returning. Robert Mackle immediately worked with the FBI and First National Bank of Miami to gather the ransom money and orchestrate a drop. A team of 25 agents and 85 bank employees counted and packaged the bills for roughly 6 hours because of the instructions, right? It's a lot of money, small bills, random numbers, to ensure that the payment would, of course, meet the kidnappers' specifications. The next day, Mackle placed the ad as instructed in the newspaper. Seeing the ad, the kidnappers called him, directing him to leave the money at the Rickenbacker Causeway, just southeast of their home the next morning. Now, the first attempt to deliver the ransom did not go as planned. Around 4 a.m. on December 19th, Robert Mackle left the ransom money for the kidnappers at the designated drop-off. Arriving shortly after, the kidnappers rolled up in a stolen 12-foot motorboat, and it was stolen from the Institute of Marine Sciences the night before. But after picking up the suitcase and beaching the boat shortly after 5 a.m., a local resident spotted one of the kidnappers walking around the neighborhood carrying a rifle. Probably not something you want to do. So you've done all this planning.
And
you walk around with a rifle at 5 in the morning. Not a good idea. So they called the police. Of course they should, right? So unaware that the FBI investigation was already in progress, local police tried to question the two kidnappers. So they found them, not knowing that the FBI was on their tail, kind of spoiling it, right? So the FBI had not shared this information with the local authorities. So this spooked them, causing them to flee, abandoning both their blue Volvo and the ransom money. So obviously the police had not brought them into custody.
Yeah, what are you guys doing?
Yeah.
So they left the money.
So, but the Mackle family is still desperate to find their daughter. So he places another ad in the paper meant to compel them to accept another delivery attempt, noting that he had no involvement in the follow-up. So he's like, it wasn't our fault. Like, please listen to us. Like, don't kill our daughter. Responding with new directions, they contacted Mackle again. Take the money to Tamiami Trail, just west of the Mackle home, at 1 a.m. on December 20th. Again, okay, we're back to being very specific all of a sudden. By the early hours of December 20th, the kidnappers finally collected the money without any hassle. It wasn't until shortly after noon that an anonymous male caller rang the FBI office and shared the coordinates for the wooded location where Barbara had been buried. So they did, at least they did say, here's where she is.
Well, and yeah, thankfully. It sounds like they never planned or wanted to kill her. I mean, that's why they went through so much trouble to set it up in the way that they did.
Yeah.
But I also think maybe them getting, freaked out by the cops, maybe it kind of went like, yeah, we got to make sure we tell them where she is because we don't want to add murder to this if we get busted.
Had you ever heard this story?
Never.
Yeah.
I don't think so. No. I mean, you may have mentioned it to me before. I remember something about you telling me something about the kidnapped sign, but I didn't know anything about it.
So it was, my wife just found something on Instagram about it. And she's like, you guys should do a story about this. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And, I know that there's been other podcast episodes or stories about this, but it actually brings up another point, which is I have blinders on when it comes to this. So I don't care if this has been covered a million times or never. I just like to discover it myself and go down that rabbit hole myself. I don't know if you try to keep blinders on or not, but like, it's okay if others cover it.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to tell it my way. And the fact that my wife discovered it was kind of cool. She's like, no, you have to do this.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I'm curious about like, if you won't do a story because you feel like it's been covered before.
No, especially not for this show. I mean, like, he did an episode of the North Hollywood Shootout.
Yeah.
And that's a story that I've known about for a while, and I've been really interested in it, in doing a whole series on it.
Yeah.
But I was like, it has been done to death. There's so much that's been covered. There's probably nothing new I could bring to the table. And that's what will keep me from doing a story that's been done a lot.
Yeah.
Not, I just want to tell it in a format like this. I think why not? Why wouldn't we share these stories,
Yeah, and I think, we were talking about another story that we did recently was the Brian Nichols case, and it was so massive at the time, especially here in Atlanta. We just don't hear about it all that often, so like it's kind of worth revisiting, and I just have these memories of like, I remember, but I don't remember all those details, and that definitely came out in the telling of that story and the discovery of some stuff that we really did know, but stuff we didn't had any idea that had happened along the way. So I think it's worth looking into, right?
Yeah.
Plus the thing is like this it was before I was born, 1968, but it did happen a couple miles from where I live right now. Yeah. So there's a local angle there too. So to get back to the story, around 2:30 that afternoon, 15 to 20 FBI agents began to search the woods of Duluth, Georgia, looking for Barbara Mackle. They had been given the coordinates. It wasn't until 4 p.m. when two agents heard faint of someone talking. Following the sound, they discovered the two air vents sticking out of the ground. Frantic, they began digging with their bare hands until they bled. Other agents joined them using tin cans and buckets from a trash pile, unearthing the fiberglass box with Barbara inside. So they all showed up in the woods, and they didn't have anything to dig this girl out.
That's. Did they just tell the police where they could find her? Yeah, I was gonna say
coordinates, but they didn't. I don't know how specific they were. Of like, bring your shovels, guys.
Very underprepared, fellas.
Yeah, here's a tin can.
Yeah,
but yeah, against all odds, Barbara was alive, dehydrated and several pounds thinner. She emerged into the daylight after more than 83 hours underground. And she said, "I can't stand. I can't walk. Will somebody tell my parents I'm all right?" That same afternoon, she was flown home on her father's private jet, reconnecting with her family. Sometime that Christmas, President Nixon visited Barbara and her family. But who had kidnapped Barbara? We'll find that out right after the break. All right, we're back. They've found Barbara in the woods. She has survived after 83 hours, buried in basically a coffin with a couple air vents sticking out. The FBI found her, dug her out, and she's okay. She's shaken.
Lucky lady.
Yeah, lucky lady. I mean, it could have been a couple more days. It could have been, a week later, and she'd be dead.
Yeah, could have been never.
Could have been
They
never.
could have just never found her.
Imagine just screaming until you can't scream anymore, being out in the middle of nowhere. That's creepy. You talk about your fears. No one wants to be buried alive.
No, that's like a fear that goes without saying. I talked about like my fear of getting lost on a desert island. Are my contacts going to get dirty or torn?
Listen to the North Pond Hermit episode, folks. Sean went off the rails of what he was worried about, like not having his contact lenses with him if he was a hermit in the woods.
That is my freaking worst fear. Here's two things I always think about. If I get stranded on a desert island, I go, I should really get LASIK because I wear contacts. And if I get stranded on a desert island, eventually I'm going to lose a contact, right? I fear that.
Okay.
It's a weird fear, but I do.
Interesting.
Hold on. I'm gonna pose a question to the audience right now. That's honest to God, like not a fear, but it's something I think about. Like if I get stranded on a desert island, like I know my way around like survival stuff. I think I'd do all right. I can make a shelter. I can make a fire. I can catch a fish with a spear. I'd figure all that out pretty easily.
Yep.
Do I pack glasses with me everywhere I go on a trip? Even camping, I pack glasses. I do. I take my glasses with me.
Don't pack a fresh pair of underwear though. Just glasses.
I would rather have my vision than clean underwear if I'm stranded on an island or in the woods. I swear to God,
that makes one of us.
Yeah, because I don't want to get lost on a desert island and not be able to see. That was the point. Anyway, no, but I think like that's a weird, odd, thing. But not getting buried alive, yeah, that's a fear of everyone's inherently. I think
it's darkness, it's claustrophobia, it's knowing that you might die. Not there's so many things, and maybe not even knowing who the people were that put you in the ground. Like, what did I do? And by the way, she's sick.
Yeah, I was gonna say that day of hers went from bad to worse.
Yeah, she's like
It's like, oh, could it be any worse? This being sick's terrible.
Yeah, like the Hong Kong flu was the best part of her day almost, when you think about it. Anyway, so who kidnapped Barbara? The FBI's investigation quickly zeroed in on the culprits. Fingerprints and a package of information about the two kidnappers was found in the glove box of that abandoned Volvo at a location of the first random drop attempt, and they identified Gary Stephen Krist, a 23-year-old prison escapee with a high IQ and a lengthy arrest record. Originally from a fishing family in Alaska, Krist had shown early signs of brilliance, but also a troubling disregard for authority. By his teens, he had already become a small-time criminal. By the age of 21 in early 1966, a failed escape sent him off to a vocational institute. But in November of that very year, Krist hacksawed the bars of his cell. Along with another inmate, he headed towards a double security fence where Krist managed to escape.
That was a secure hospital.
Yeah. His companion was fatally wounded. He fled to Boston with his wife, Carmen, and two sons. He's got a whole family, I guess. A month later, using the alias George C. Deacon, he fabricated credentials and bluffed his way into a job at MIT as a technician, where he would be for a year and a half.
See, this is these people. You had a con man,
Great imposter.
a great imposter, James Hogue, another con man imposter. These guys that get into Harvard and Princeton, and you're the guy you talked about.
The brilliance and the capacity to do things without getting caught. The brilliance to escape from prison, to get a hacksaw, to climb over a fence, to then go to MIT with your family.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So later in June of 1968, Krist moved south to Miami, where he took a job as a researcher at the University of Miami's Institute of Science. He's moving around again. There, he met his accomplice, Ruth Eisemann-Schier, while on a scientific cruise aboard the ship Pillsbury. She was a 26-year-old student from Honduras, and she was on a scholarship to study marine biology at the university. She was also exceptionally gifted, fluent in 4 languages, and ambitious in her studies. So she found herself drawn to Krist, whose intellectual prowess and charm won her over. And we see this time and time again, right? The seductive power of the criminal, the brilliant mind, whatever that is. He's pretty much brainwashed her at this point. Within 2 or 3 weeks of meeting, the pair discussed the idea of running away together. But Krist dismissed the idea because they first had to have enough money saved up. By October, he shared an outline he had planned for plotting what he thought was the perfect crime. Thinking Schier was the ideal partner, he drew her into this twisted vision, the kidnapping of a wealthy heiress for a multi-million-dollar ransom. The plan has been hatched.
Yeah.
In her confession, she said, this plan included the design and construction of a capsule-type box in which a prospective kidnap victim could be buried beneath the ground and in which life could be sustained for 7 days. So specific.
Yes, it's specific.
Yeah, 7 days. So what that actually did is it gave him a window to, take the photo, to have the ad placed in the newspaper, and then have a little bit of a buffer if it goes wrong.
Right.
If it takes them a while to find the heiress. So, yeah, very specific 7 days. So they were thinking ahead.
Huh.
So Krist chose Barbara Mackle because he believed she was smart enough to understand the instructions and would likely keep her wits about her enough to remain calm while buried. I don't know how he knew this, but...
Well, he obviously did his research because he knew where the guy her dad lived, and he was on the property.
At Emory, where she was staying at the hotel.
Sounds like this guy was smart enough to do his research.
So before he left on this adventure, he put his wife and boys in a place in Redwood City, California, where they would spend time at her mother's house. So,
girl in the box.
Right.
Yeah, right up in that same area.
Really?
Yeah, which is just weird. The putting a girl in a box. I mean, that's
right.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's a weird connection.
That is a weird connection.
They ended up there,
and these are years separated.
Yeah.
I wonder if the hookers learned of this, if they knew of any connection.
Yeah, I don't know.
Kind of going the other way.
Yeah, it's weird.
So it wasn't until after he got his family settled that Krist and Schier left Miami December 13th and headed to Emory, where Barbara Mackle was enrolled. They arrived in Atlanta on December 14th, stopping for breakfast at the Roadway Inn Motel, where they began to search for the heiress. That same afternoon, the pair had called several offices at Emory, only to find out that Barbara was staying at the very motel that they had been at that morning. Crazy coincidence.
Yeah.
To be sure, Krist called the room. When Mrs. Mackle answered, Krist shared that he had a certified letter for her that he needed to deliver later. I mean, this whole thing could have fallen apart right away. Yeah. The fact that they were eating breakfast in the Roadway Motel, the fact that this rich family went to the Roadway Motel, the fact that she was, I mean...
And maybe it was different in the 60s, Roadway, but I mean, it's really like a Motel 8.
Yeah.
Hotel 8,
Motel 6, yeah.
That stuff is. Red Roof Inn, like that's what I associate.
It's kind of all you had.
Yeah, like if you go if you're driving across a couple states or something and you're just exhausted and you pull over to the first place you see, you don't care what it is, it's probably
But still,
a place like that.
the fact that
Yeah.
Barbara got sick and that was the reason they went to the motel in the first place, that she stayed with her mother. This thing should have never happened. So
Here we are.
And here we are. So now they know where Barbara is. They know she's at the roadway. And so Krist and Shire drive to the Gwinnett County countryside, hunting for a location to bury the box. Monday night, they drove around the Emory campus, visiting Barbara's dorm. They then returned to the Roadway Inn to have dinner at the motel's pancake house. While dining, Krist spotted a policeman's cap on a nearby hat rack. Excusing him from the table, he took the hat. He would later use it to pose as an officer to gain entry into Mackle's room. So remember when they knock on the door, I'm sure what happens, they go to the front
desk and say,
front
"Hey,
desk. Hey, I need to check some things out."
Yeah.
So all part of the plan, right?
It's crazy. I mean, I would never even have the cojones to take a cop's hat off the thing. You know what I mean? I
Right.
just
Takes them a minute. They're going to get up a few minutes later.
right. Yeah.
By the way, you're trying to kidnap and put duct tape over someone's mouth, and they're probably screaming, or you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So it did not take long for authorities to track Krist. A 1969 green Ford sedan he had stolen was later found abandoned in West Palm Beach. It had a Merlin Rent-A-Car of Miami sticker on it. An employee of the rental agency said he rented it to George Deacon, the name I brought up earlier. Inside the car, investigators discovered a blue suitcase that contained the ransom money. So this is when they got the money, this is where they found it in that car. Confirmation from the telephone company verified that a long-distance call was made shortly after noon from West Palm Beach to the Atlanta FBI office. So this was, the ransom call, and this is, hey, go here and do all these things. And so they're able to put all this stuff together. So after calling to tell them where they could find Barbara, he purchased that boat from D&D Marine Supply in West Palm Beach, paying with 109 of the $20 ransom bills. He thought he should escape following the intracoastal waterway to the Gulf at Fort Myers and head north. But soon he realized he was being shadowed by a Coast Guard plane and ran for cover in a dense, swampy mangrove where he spent 4 more days hiding. But the authorities eventually found him, spotting his boat from a helicopter as it mindlessly spun in the water, like running into a circle. The motor still running. Krist fled to shore carrying a case, leading investigators to chase him to Hog Island. After a 12-hour standoff, he was arrested. He was caught with a hunting knife and suitcase that contained roughly $17,000 in $20 bills.
Man, all that
Yeah.
for 17 grand.
In the boat was a large duffel bag containing 2 smaller
There you
bags.
go.
Inside the smaller duffel bags, agents found roughly $475,000 in $20 bills.
Okay, there you go. I thought maybe the rest of it,
No, they got it.
they got it.
But Shire, his accomplice, was nowhere to be found. When FBI agents were searching houses in the Mackle neighborhood, they found a 2-way radio once owned by Krist, but they were still missing the second in the pair. They discovered Krist and Shire sold a trailer on Northwest 27th Avenue the night before. Inside the trailer was the original box in which it came, and the serial numbers matched, purchased for $49.95. So, in March of 1969, 79 days on the run, Shire was finally caught in Oklahoma when a routine fingerprint check for a job application alerted former FBI employees working for the Oklahoma State Crime Bureau of a match to Shire. So they finally got her.
Can't run forever.
By the way, it kind of slips through when a routine fingerprint check for a job application.
Right? Yeah.
Fingerprinting someone for a job. That was,
Right.
I guess that was a thing.
Depends on what job.
Yeah.
You know.
I don't know what she was
But-
trying to do. So At Krist's trial in May of 1969, many damning details were revealed. Several service station operators in Georgia testified that Krist had visited their stations posing as a scientist in search of an isolated spot to bury a box of, quote, sensitive scientific instruments for an experiment.
Well, you're not going to say it's for a ransom, a hostage.
But there's a certain audaciousness to this where, like...
But maybe that's why it works.
Maybe
that's why these stories work. They, you know what I mean?
There's a confidence. There's a, like...
Yeah.
Of course
I'm doing that. Why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
It's not weird.
What do you think? I'm a criminal?
Oh, yeah. What do you think?
con
What am I
artist?
burying a girl in a box?
Yeah. Well, that was just science.
Yeah, you're right.
Ever the con artist, Krist claimed he was going to set off dynamite charges to measure the refraction of shockwaves. Again,
Reasonable.
completely off the rails. One service operator suggested the Norcross area, where Barbara was found, giving him directions. Go there. That's fine. Obviously, he was convicted. There was over 200 pieces of evidence against Krist. Among them were 3 Honduran passports, each with Shire's name on them. An envelope addressed to George Deacon, which he had used several times. They found 2 plane tickets, a Delta flight from Miami to Chicago, and so on and so forth. Film recovered from the camera revealed photos, including one image of Barbara used in the ransom demand. That'll get you every time, right? You got a camera with film in it that has someone buried in a box, that's probably going to sink you.
And the picture was the one with her eyes closed.
Yeah.
Holding the kidnapped sign.
So Krist was ultimately found guilty, narrowly avoiding the electric chair by 1 vote by the jury. Because the jury recommended mercy, he was sentenced to life in prison instead.
Why would you give him the electric chair? I could see you calling that attempted murder, because she was in a box, but you have to take into account that they gave her food and air holes, and it was never an intended murder, right?
Right.
I mean, I'm not, I'm not standing up for the guys, but...
No one died.
Yeah, no one died, but there was no intention of death. It's, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
He wasn't trying to kill her. Clearly, he was going out of his way to not kill her. So, why you would give somebody the death penalty for a hostage that's crazy.
So I have a note. This is something that, so Angelica, our researcher, put this in here, and I can't let this go. This is pretty crazy. A note from her is that one of Krist's court-appointed lawyers was the imperial wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. In closing arguments, he denounced prosecution witnesses as ends and kosher, and said that the FBI put on a show in the case because Mackle was a friend of the president. Remember, she met Richard Nixon after that. I mean...
Interesting. I don't know what to make of that.
So Shire was sentenced to a 7-year prison term for her secondary role in the kidnapping, but only served 4 years before being deported back to Honduras. While in prison, her mother was killed, leaving her to inherit several residences and a large sum of money.
Yeah. That's what a weird twist of like fate that is.
Within 6 months of returning to Honduras, she married. She had 3 children eventually and owned the Guadalupe Pharmacy in the capital of Honduras.
So things worked out well for old, whatever her name was.
Lastly, Krist initially tried to escape from prison in a garbage truck. When that failed, he shifted his focus, enrolling in college classes, training as a paramedic, and working in the prison hospital. He spent years pursuing appeals while incarcerated, all of which failed. Determined to get out, Krist committed himself to prove he had been reformed. He began to attend church, tutored fellow inmates, and befriended Tommy Morris, the chairman of the Georgia Parole Board. A decade after his conviction, on May 14, 1979, Krist was paroled and released with the condition that he move back to Alaska and not return to Georgia without board permission. There's so much more to this story that we could go on for a very long time, but it's crazy how all these events hit together. Con artists, buried people. I mean,
hostage,
yeah,
leaving, weird messages in the personal ads of the paper or whatever it is, it's
we talked about this in another episode where you will run into, murderers or serial killers in your life and never know it.
Yeah.
I think, another version of that is like events that have happened right around the corner from where you live, you may never know about unless it's by chance or if you go looking for them. And like, this is a crazy story. And I'm not sure how many people in Atlanta even know this story, right? Like, I don't know. I mean,
from the 60s, maybe older people, but
yeah, but a lot of people aren't from Atlanta that live in Atlanta.
Yeah.
They may not know this story.
Probably not.
So I just really enjoyed unpacking this and telling the story of Barbara Mackle. So that's it for this week's episode. Thanks for joining us again on How It All Went South. I'm Jason Hoke. That's Sean Kipe. We'll see you next time.
See ya.